You didn't come this far by accident. You weren't just lucky. Every battle, every storm, every moment they underestimated you, it all led you here. And now, as you stand in your power, unshaken and untouchable, you realize something. You were never meant to blend in, never meant to be ordinary. You are chosen. You are called. The weight you carried wasn't for nothing. It was shaping you, refining you, preparing you for this very moment. They tried to break you, tried to contain you, tried to twist your light into something small, something manageable. But the fire inside you was never meant to be controlled. It burns too bright, too pure, too divine to be dimmed by those who fear it. And now, they feel it. That shift in the air, that undeniable presence that signals the end of their influence over you. No more shrinking, no more explaining, no more waiting for permission to be everything you were always meant to be. Step into it, own it. Your home, your spirit, your existence, it is blessed. Not by them, not by circumstance, but by something far greater. And no force on earth can take that from you. Stand tall, move forward, and never look back. The chosen do not beg for a seat at the table. We build our own. They have always relied on the same strategies: subtle barbs, calculated silence, the weight of expectation pressing down without words. They assume the old rules still apply, that hesitation will grip you like before, that the need to appease will overtake your resolve. But this time, there is only stillness, a void where obedience used to be. Their confusion festers into unease, their instincts warning them that something fundamental has shifted. In desperation, they escalate, hoping to provoke a reaction, to restore the pattern that once kept them in control. They prod at the past, throwing out insults, weaving manipulation into their words, anything to reel you back in. Yet their reach is short, their tactics useless against the silence that meets them. The version of you they once dismissed, the force they swore could never exist, now stands before them, not in rage, but in detachment. And that absence of emotion, that refusal to engage, is what sends fear curling around their spine. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. Galatians 6:7. A tree planted by the river does not beg for rain. An eagle does not apologize for soaring higher than those who refuse to fly. And a chosen one does not carry burdens that were never theirs to bear. For so long, the balance seemed real. It looked steady. It felt unshakable. But that's because it was never balance. It was endurance. It was you, holding more than your share, carrying what was meant to break them, so they wouldn't have to feel the weight of their own choices. It was your patience, your grace, your unshakable heart that kept the illusion intact, and they thrived on it. They took your explanations as permission, your sacrifice as an expectation, your giving as a bottomless well they could dip into whenever they pleased. Not once did they stop to wonder if you too could run dry, if your back could ache beneath the weight of responsibilities that were never meant to be yours, if your kindness had limits. But everything has a season, and that season is over. Now the weight shifts. The ground beneath them begins to tremble, not because you pushed them, not because you fought back, but because you simply stepped away. You no longer carry what they refuse to hold. You no longer explain yourself to those who have already made up their minds. You no longer soften the truth to make them comfortable. And the moment you remove yourself from the equation, they are left standing alone with the reality they spent so long ignoring. And oh, how they panic. They search for the old version of you, the one who would rush to fix, to explain, to heal. But that version no longer exists. They reach for the same tired tactics: guilt, obligation, the silent assumption that you will always be there, waiting. But they are met with something they never prepared for: nothing. This silence is not empty. It is not cold. It is not cruel. It is the sound of unearned devotion being withdrawn, the sound of you reclaiming your energy, your time, your spirit, the sound of them finally realizing that what they mistook for endless grace was never free. It was a gift, and now it is gone. Let them sit in the wreckage. Let them wonder. Let them question. Let them search for the well they drained dry. But do not return. Do not explain. Do not shrink yourself to make them comfortable. You did not come this far to be a source for those who refuse to fill themselves. The well is closed. The season has shifted, and the chosen do not go back. The weight of disregard settles heavily now, not on your shoulders, but on theirs. It is not the loss of you that shakes them, but the unveiling of an imbalance they always ignored. For the first time, they feel the emptiness of a one-sided exchange, the discomfort of their own entitlement being exposed. They resist, pushing against the shift with tired tactics, veiled guilt, performative hurt, accusations of selfishness masked as concern. But the ground beneath them is unsteady. The moment you decline to explain, the moment you refuse to be swayed by obligation, their illusion crumbles. They reach out, expecting the same response, the same unwavering presence, but they are met with nothing. Their questions remain unanswered, their demands unmet. They never questioned your exhaustion, your sacrifice, the quiet ways you bent to accommodate them. Yet the second you require acknowledgement, the instant you remove their comfort, you become the antagonist in their story. Let them rewrite the narrative however they please. Let them spin tales of betrayal. Let them whisper of your supposed cruelty. Because in the end, the truth remains unchanged. What they took for granted was never theirs to keep. And now, they are left to understand the true cost of a kindness they never cherished. There was a time when every question demanded an answer, every doubt needed clearing, and every misunderstanding called for explanation. It felt necessary, an obligation to translate yourself into a language they refused to learn. You tried over and over, thinking clarity would lead to recognition, that patience would be met with understanding. But they were never listening, were they? They heard only what suited them, distorted your words into justifications for their behavior, mistook your empathy for permission to take more. But now, the conversation ends before it begins. There is no declaration, no dramatic farewell, only a quiet shift, a door that no longer opens at their demand. They notice immediately that something is different, that access is no longer freely given. The initial approach is subtle, a casual message, a careful test of boundaries, a calculated pause before expectation returns. Then come the accusations, the sharp-edged words meant to pull you back into place. So this is who you are now. Too good to answer, acting like you're above everyone else. But silence is no longer an invitation for them to fill the space. It is final. Calls ring unanswered. Messages sit without response. They scramble for control, but there is nothing left to grasp. They never once questioned why you bent so easily. But now that you stand firm, they panic. Let them. Let them rewrite the past, however they please. The truth remains unchanged. Explanation was never the key to being understood. And now, they will have to sit with the absence they created. The door they assumed would always be open now locked, without a need for a key. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. Isaiah 54:17. A lion does not turn when the jackals whisper. The eagle does not seek approval from the crows, and a child of God does not beg for space in a world they were born to walk boldly in. The storm that was meant to break you only cleansed you. The fire that was meant to consume you only refined you. And now, standing in the stillness of your own power, you realize this peace was always yours to claim. Everything feels different in the quiet. The weight that once clung to your shoulders like chains, the unseen obligations wrapped around your spirit have fallen away. There is no more apologizing for your presence, no more justifying your existence. You wake up and the air is clear. The heaviness is gone, not because the world has changed, but because you have. There is no more battle to fight, no more convincing to do. The war ended the moment you realized you never had to engage in it to begin with, and people feel it. Some meet your presence with warmth, moving with grace, without pretense, without agenda. They recognize what you carry, the stillness, the knowing, the unshakable foundation that cannot be moved by anything outside of yourself. They exhale near you, finding ease in your presence, because they too are standing on solid ground. They too have learned that peace is not a place, not a circumstance, but a choice. But then there are others, the ones who once leaned too heavily on you without offering balance, the ones who never considered that their taking had a cost. They hesitate now, they falter. Their words do not flow as easily as before. Their attempts to pull you back into their world fall flat. It unsettles them, though they cannot explain why. They sense the shift, but they do not understand it. Something about you no longer bends to meet them, no longer adjusts to make them comfortable. The games they once played, the small manipulations, the twisting of words, the careful orchestration of guilt and obligation, fail before they even begin. They fidget, they look away, they search for a foothold in a place that no longer belongs to them. And that is when it dawns on them. It is not punishment, keeping them at a distance. It is not vengeance. It is simply the absence of what once fed them. The well has dried, not because it was emptied, but because it is no longer theirs to drink from. For so long, they assumed that their access to you was permanent, that the doors they walked through would never close. But they never considered the truth, that the moment you stepped into your fullness, the moment you stopped shrinking to accommodate them, was the moment they lost the grip they never should have had to begin with. And now, they are left to sit in the reality they created. Because the moment you stopped chasing, stopped explaining, stopped fighting for a seat at a table that was never worthy of you, was the moment they realized the light they mistook for weakness was never theirs to control. It was never theirs to claim, and it never will be. Chosen one, let them wonder. Let them talk, let them watch, but do not look back. The only path now is forward. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Psalm 23:5. A wolf in sheep's clothing can fool the flock, but it cannot deceive the shepherd. A candle may flicker in the wind, but it does not fear the dark, for the flame was never borrowed. It was placed there by the hand of God Himself. And when you are chosen, when your light is ordained, no force, no whisper, no shadow can put it out. They sense it before they even realize what they're feeling. The shift, the unsettling quiet that surrounds you now. There was a time when they knew exactly what to say, exactly how to pull at the unseen strings, how to twist the weight of their own burdens into something you would willingly carry. And for so long, it worked. You absorbed what wasn't yours, you softened your own edges, you met them at their brokenness and called it kindness. But that time is over. Now they approach with the same performance, the same lamentations, the same invisible chains they once bound you with. But something is different. Their carefully rehearsed grievances no longer find a landing place. The old tactics fall flat. The sympathy they relied on, the silent compliance they expected, it is no longer theirs to take. And they feel it. Oh, they feel it. Their words falter mid-sentence. Their confidence cracks, just for a moment. The rhythm they once dictated with ease is disrupted by something unfamiliar. Your stillness. No effort to fix, no offer to mend, no attempt to soften the truth for their comfort. Just silence, just presence, just an invisible line drawn between what was and what will never be again. For the first time, they are forced to sit with themselves, and it is unbearable, because the weight they carried was never meant for you. And now, without your hands there to steady it, they are left to face it alone. They search for a response, a reaction, a sign that the old cycle is still intact. But nothing comes. You have become untouchable, not in anger, not in defiance, but in the quiet, unshakable knowing that you are no longer available to be drained. The truth is a doorway, and everyone has a choice. Some will walk through it, shedding their illusions, facing the reality they've spent years avoiding. Others will turn away, retreating into the arms of those still willing to entertain the lies, still willing to participate in a game you have outgrown. And so, they step back, not because they want to, but because they must. There is no space for them here. Let them talk, let them question, let them look for the version of you they once knew. But do not turn around. Do not offer an explanation. The table is set, the feast is prepared, and not everyone who once walked with you will be seated beside you. The game was once predictable, effortless, a pattern so well practiced that it required no thought. A carefully placed remark, a casual jab wrapped in humor, a subtle reminder of past wounds, all designed to pull a reaction, to spark the cycle that ensured their control. And for so long, it worked. But now, something is different. The cues they relied on no longer bring the expected results. The first attempt at provocation is met with quiet. They wait for the shift, for the inevitable defense, for the scramble to explain, to soften the blow of their words. But nothing happens. The balance tips, and suddenly, they are the only one left speaking. A second attempt, harsher this time, louder, tinged with desperation, lands with the same silence. And in that moment, they feel it. The absence of control, the unraveling of an unspoken contract they never imagined would break. There is no visible anger in your eyes, no bitterness, no need to prove anything at all. Just an unfaltering, unreadable presence that swallows their words whole. The room shifts, not around them, but around you. The same phrases that once struck like arrows now hang in the air, weightless and ineffective. For the first time, they are forced to listen, not to you, but to themselves. Their voice, usually met with resistance or justification, is met only with its own hollow echo. And in that unbearable void, they are left with the one thing they fear most, an unfiltered reflection of who they truly are. No confrontation, no grand declaration of severed ties. Just the quiet certainty that they no longer hold the power they once believed was theirs. If your heart overflows with God's blessings, let that love shine. Click the super thank you button and give $20 or more to plant seeds of faith that will impact countless lives. Your generosity reflects His abundance. Be a vessel of His grace and watch His kingdom flourish through you. Once, they stood as the guiding force. the voice of authority that shaped your decisions, the presence that dictated the course of your journey. They offered wisdom, direction, the illusion of knowledge that you clung to, believing they held the map to places you had yet to reach. Back then, you listened with unwavering trust, convinced that their insight was indispensable. But time has a way of unraveling illusions, and the moment comes when their influence no longer defines your path. The shift is subtle at first, a glance that lingers too long, a tone laced with something unspoken, a carefully worded reminder of how much they've given, how far they've carried you. The expectation is clear: deference, acknowledgement, an unspoken loyalty to the role they once played. But something is different now. You do not seek approval. Do not hesitate before standing firm in your own decisions. And in that moment, they know authority is slipping from their grasp, and there is nothing they can do to stop it. You watch it unfold in real time. The faltering confidence, the measured words, the nervous glance that was never there before. They scramble for footing, reaching for the past as if it can tether them to the influence they once wielded. But you are already beyond it. The power they claimed was never theirs. It was borrowed, sustained only by your willingness to believe in it. And now, standing in the full light of your own strength, you return their lessons with a nod of gratitude before walking away. No argument, no validation, no lingering need for approval. They are left in the silence, grasping at a control that no longer exists. Therefore, if the Son makes you free, you shall be free indeed. John 8:36. A bird does not ask for permission to fly when the cage door swings open. A lion does not apologize for outgrowing the den it was once raised in. And a chosen one does not stay bound by expectations that were never theirs to carry. They built the framework carefully, brick by brick, rule by rule, each piece placed with precision to ensure that you would never question it. It was designed to hold you, not in chains, but in obligations wrapped so tightly around your soul that you mistook them for love. The unspoken expectations, the quiet weight of duty, woven into you so seamlessly that you carried them without resistance. And for a long time, you did. You bore the load they placed upon you, believing it was yours to hold. But the moment you take a step back, something shifts. Cracks begin to form where there were once solid walls. The foundation they thought was unshakable begins to tremble under its own weight. And then the fear sets in. Not in you, but in them. Because the balance they relied on wasn't real. It only worked because you were the one holding it up. First, they reach for your loyalty. They remind you of the past, of all they've done for you, of what you owe. Not out of love, not out of genuine connection, but out of desperation. To keep you tethered, to make you feel like your freedom comes at a cost too high to bear. And when that fails, they rewrite the past. They twist the story, reshape the memories, tell you that you misunderstood, that you are the one who has changed too much, too fast. The pressure mounts. The words tighten around you like a rope, waiting for you to break, waiting for you to surrender, waiting for you to slip back into the role they assigned you. But you don't. And the silence that follows is louder than any argument could ever be. The first boundary, the first refusal, the first time you say no and do not explain yourself. It shakes them. They watch, waiting for hesitation, expecting you to waver, to return to the version of yourself they knew how to control. But you never do, and the realization comes slowly, painfully, inevitably. They have lost their grip. Some will fight harder, their fear revealing itself in anger, in accusations, in desperate attempts to pull you back. Others will withdraw, their absence a quiet confession that they do not know how to meet you where you stand now. And for a brief moment, you may wonder, have I gone too far? Have I been too harsh? Is this what freedom truly costs? But then you look at what remains. The hands that reach toward you, not out of expectation, but out of love. The voices that do not demand, but support. And in that moment, the truth settles in your spirit like a holy fire. The ones who were always meant to walk with you have never feared your growth. Only those who sought to contain you did. At one point, they overlooked you, barely registering your presence as anything significant. Perhaps they engaged in passing, tossing casual judgments your way when they assumed you were still searching for validation, still willing to bend under the weight of their opinions. But they miscalculated. Something in the air around you has shifted, not because you seek recognition, but because you have stopped needing it. Your words no longer reach out for acceptance. They stand, unwavering, whether they are understood or not. And that shift is what unsettles them the most. The ones who once lingered in the shadows, those who thrived on subtle jabs, passive disapproval, and carefully veiled condescension, begin to slip away. They attempt to stir the old dynamics, offering bait wrapped in cynicism, casting doubts like hooks in the water, waiting for the familiar tug. But there is no response, no effort to explain, no attempt to meet them at their level. And that silence, far from weakness, becomes the loudest answer of all. The space you've created does not seek conflict, yet it does not flinch in the face of it either. The ones who resonate with your presence recognize the game at play, and without instruction, they see the unraveling happening in real time. The ones who cannot adapt must make a choice, evolve or disappear. Some double down, pushing forward with one last attempt to reclaim lost ground, their words laced with nostalgia for the version of you they once controlled. But the reality dawns slowly, creeping in with undeniable finality. There is no more access, no explanation, no invitation back into the spaces they once occupied. They watch, expecting resistance, expecting the old wounds to open and spill justification at their feet. But all they receive is an absence that echoes louder than any response ever could. And in that unbearable stillness, they come to the realization they feared most. What they once held over you no longer exists. They test the waters, searching for a foothold in a world where their words once dictated your response. A smirk, a taunt, a question laced with condescension. Bait, carefully placed in front of you, waiting for the reaction they believe is inevitable. But it never comes. Without hesitation, without ceremony, you move past them as if they do not exist. No defense, no rebuttal, no acknowledgement, just an effortless departure from a game you no longer play. And in that instant, reality hits them like a silent avalanche. The influence they once held has vanished. The predictable patterns they relied on have dissolved, leaving them stranded in their own irrelevance. It is not anger that unsettles them, not confrontation, but the unbearable weight of being unnoticed by someone whose attention they once controlled. They were certain they knew you, certain they could pull you back, but the person they recognize no longer stands before them. You have become something beyond their reach, unshackled, untamed, unwilling to shrink for their comfort. The realization is slow, creeping, and irreversible. They no longer hold a place in your world, and that truth, more than anything else, is what unravels them. For too long, They chipped away at you, piece by piece, carving away the parts they deemed too much, too wild, too inconvenient. They rewrote your narrative, dictated what was acceptable, and convinced you that your value was tied to how well you fit within their lines. But they were mistaken. This was never about becoming someone else, never about extinguishing softness or embracing vengeance. It was about reclamation, about gathering the fragments of yourself that were scattered, dismissed, buried beneath the weight of their expectations. No longer will you contort to fit a space that was never meant to contain you. No longer will you filter your existence through their approval. The discomfort they feel in your presence now is not your burden to carry. It is theirs to reconcile, their own reflections staring back at them, unchanged by your absence, yet shaken by your refusal to return. They murmur, they speculate, they wait for signs of hesitation, but none come. There is no need to explain, no desire to ease their confusion, no urge to seek understanding from those who only valued the version of you they could control. You move forward, untethered, bound by nothing but your own truth. The weight has lifted, the restraints have fallen, and for the first time, you stand in the fullness of your own existence. Let them wonder, let them watch, but do not look back. The only path now is forward.